So good afternoon, everybody, and thanks very much for tuning in today. My name is David Quinn. I'm a Superintending Veterinary Inspector down in Dublin Port. So we just wanted to talk to you today about some of the issues maybe that we had encountered over the past 10 months. And we try to break them into maybe issues that were encountered due to possibly, the legal obligations not being filled. And then Paddy's going to come in after me with kind of more practical tips about how you can increase your efficiency moving through the port. So the first thing that I wanted to do before I talk about some of the actual issues was maybe just to remind people that actually anybody who's importing products of animal origin that are subject to SPS checks, that they do have legal obligations. These type of products are covered by both EU and national legislation. And it's actually an offence to remove a consignment from the port if you haven't presented that type of product to the BCP for its checks. So just for people's information there, anyone who has in their possession or under the control, sells, supplies or transports an imported product of animal origin that's subject to these SPS checks, they do have a legal obligation to comply with the legislation. I think there might be maybe a little bit of not confusion, but that some people think that it's the person who signs the shed is the only person who has any sort of sole legal obligation under the legislation, but actually it's all those other people who, hauliers, people who are selling it, storing it, that kind of stuff. So any of those kind of imported products of animal origin that are subject to SPS checks, they must be presented to the BCP for their checks. So we do keep records of non-compliance and offences like that. The legislation does allow us to compile that type of information, and then it does allow us to target operators who have a history of non-compliance. So clearly, if you're on that list and you're targeted, that will increase your time spent in the port, because instead of just going for a routine seal check, you could be pulled in for a more rigorous physical check or full identity check. So those kind of things do increase your time. And also there is a potential for us to involve the Food Safety Authority or our revenue in our follow-up measures on that. So again, that these are things that people want to avoid for the obvious issue of delays, and also issues around reputation as well. So some of the delays that we commonly encounter would be issues where maybe a shed hasn't been created for all the consignments. So obviously we can't allow any consignment to leave the port if we don't have a shed and to validate that shed. So if the shed hasn't been created, the trailer will be detained until the shed is created for that, and it allows us to validate that. So all of these things, if they're not done, they increase your delays and your time spent in the port. You must have a shed for every consignment, and we do see that where we have multiple consignments on board, and so sometimes we have the health certs and everything for that, but they haven't actually created a shed. So I just want to get that point across today. You have to have a shed for every one of your consignments of product of animal origin, and if you stick with that and you have all your sheds, you will take the happy path, as we call it, down to C7, and obviously that massively increases your exit time from the port. Another one that we do need people to adhere to is the 24-hour notification period. That's not always been adhered to. We need that basically so that we can actually get the documents done prior to the arrival, and the documentary checks done prior to the arrival of the consignment. At times there will be issues on the documents that we need to go back and we need to tic-tac with the agent on, and that period allows us to do that. So if something has been submitted and there's a problem with it, that 24 hours allows us to get back onto the agent, have that issue sorted, and by the time the consignment actually arrives in the port, it's good to go. Another problem that we do see is that not all the associated paperwork that's required is not accompanying the consignment. A hard copy of the health cert must be presented to the BCP with the consignment. We don't always get that. Now, I understand that there is issues there, particularly with the unaccompanied consignments, but you can make your life easier here, particularly with the unaccompanied consignments, that when we have to bring these containers up to T10 to open the back doors to find that health cert, the vast majority of people, I'd say, would have the health cert. It's just sitting there at the back in the very last pallet that went in, and it's easily accessible. Other times we're having to actually try to search for that, and we're 10 months into this now, so we'll hit the point eventually where we can't continue to search through trailers looking for health certs. So the message from there, the take-home message from that is that you have a hard copy of the health cert. It has to be presented to the BCP with the consignment, and if it's in an unaccompanied trailer, that you would leave it somewhere at the back that it's easily accessible. Now, that's easier with things like ambient goods, clearly, than if you're sending chilled or frozen products. But I mean, there's practical solutions there, like you put it in a Tupperware box and tape it to the last pallet at the back. One other issue that I just wanted to highlight and discuss here today was the issue of bonded warehouses and SPS products. Any SPS product, as I've mentioned previously, it has to present at the BCP to have its shed validated before it can move out of the port, and that includes moving to bonded warehouses. So while a bonded warehouse is under customs supervision, it cannot travel to that bonded warehouse until it has had its shed validated. And we do see that type of consignment. It may be groupage loads where there's other products that are not of SPS interest, and we have a small amount of SPS goods in a consignment. But regardless of that, that small amount of product still has to present to the BCP for its checks. So that's just something that we wanted to make you aware of, that if that is part of your supply chain or your logistics that you're operating using bonded warehouses, that those SPS products cannot travel directly to the bonded warehouses. So in terms of, like I said, you know, areas where you have legal obligations and that possibly they're not always being met, and that's causing some of the delays, that's what we've just highlighted it there. I'd pass you over to Paddy now, who's going to run through the more practical things that people can do to try and move consignments through the port in a more efficient manner. So thanks very much.